Hey, mighty men of God, Joe Martin here with Real Men Connect, where we help good men become godly men by connecting good men to successful husbands, great fathers, and strong leaders. Guys, we have our Real Man ride along today, and I'm actually on the way to see my wife to go work out today. But I had a meeting, an appointment today with a good friend of mine who's also a pastor of a local church here. And we had a great discussion today about something that I'm sure a lot of men can relate to. And it's waiting on the Lord. Now, when I say waiting on the Lord, what I mean is that we know that God has given us a promise, a thing that He told us, a vision that He's given us. I mean, whether it be for ministry, for your work, for your marriage, for your children, for an idea that you've been contemplating in your head, a business you wanted to start. It doesn't matter, but you know that vision that God is giving you, that He says is going to come to pass, and you can feel it in your bones that you know it is going to happen. And that vision gets us excited, because we know without a vision that God says that the people perish. And so we know that a vision gives you energy, it gives you life, it drives your passion, it gets you excited about getting up in the morning without an alarm clock. And so we were talking about that each one of us, we were given a vision of how he was given a vision for getting started in ministry and becoming a pastor of a church. How I was given a vision to do men's ministry and to do men's discipleship. But we came to a point that we were talking about that waiting process. We both agreed that we had a lot of faith in knowing that, believing that God is going to do what He says He's going to do. But at the same time, we have faith, but we sometimes lack the patience to wait. And so the question is, how do you get to the promise? What does it take to get to God's promise, that vision that He's giving you? Well, we broke it down into something that I think is rather simple, but at the same time, I think it could bless you if you allow this to really get rooted into your spirit and understand that this is all part of God's plan. So we started with that. In order to get to God's promise, you first have to go through a process. Let me say that again. In order to get to God's promise, you must first be willing to go through the process. Well, to be honest with you, even if you're not willing, you still have to go through the process anyway. And so that's a part that we have a problem with, because we want to get to the promise, but we don't want to go through the process to get to the promise, because sometimes that process is very painful. And no one likes a painful process. It's no different than having something in your body removed by surgery. You still have to get cut in order to go through that process of surgery to get to the healing part. So we agreed that a lot of times we have a struggle with getting to the promise because we struggle with the process. We don't want to have to go through the process. And then we brought up another point that, well, he brought it up, and I thought this was a great point. The pastor told me, he says, not only do we have to go through a process, that we also have to go through preparation for the process. Now, I like that. And guys, I mean, you really have to think about this for just a second. God has given you a promise. He's told you about that business you're going to start. He told you about that ministry that you're going to lead. He told you about the kind of husband, the kind of father He wants you to be. But at the same time, He knows that He must take you through a process in order to get there. Now, if you're willing to say, God, okay, raise your hand, God, I am willing to go through this process. Now God has to prepare you as you go through the process. That means there's going to be some pruning. That means there's going to be some chiseling away of things that do not reflect Christ in your life. There's going to be some tough decisions and choices you're going to have to make. But He's all preparing you. He's preparing you for the process so you can get to the promise. Now, the question we should be asking is not, God, why am I going through this? But God, how are you preparing me to go through this? And God, give me the faith and the strength to endure the process as I get to the promise. So examine your life and look at how God has prepared you, because all you have to do is any vision that God has brought to fruition, if you go back and you examine it, go back and look at the process you had to go through. Then look at how God prepared you for that process in order to get to that promise. And I guarantee you, as you look back, because hindsight is not only 20/20, I think it's 15/15. If you go back and you look back, you will realize that you are now a better person, because God prepared you for the process that took you into the promise. So before you get discouraged, before you give up on that promise, understand that God has a plan for your life. And that plan is not to bring you harm. It's to give you hope and a future and to help you become prosperous and successful. So buckle down, allow him to prepare you, go through the process so you can step into the promise. And as always, remember, we are males by birth, but we are men by choice. And we must, and I say we must make the choice, because a good male is a terrible thing to waste. So until next time, be blessed, stay strong, and most importantly, stay in his grip.